Okay, real quick, from the jump, a little editor's bay thing here. Right after I finished recording this fairly long 2025 retrospective, let's call it, video, I got this in the mail. And I figured I should probably talk about it. And there were a couple of other things that I forgot, so I'm tacking this onto the beginning. This is the new Burning Wind LP, Hellbound. Came out very, very late last year. I think like second week of December or something like that. It came out on Bandcamp. Didn't get issued on vinyl until very beginning of this year. I just got my copy in the mail. This is great. I liked their demo previously. This is a mostly Boston area project. I think their singer lives in New York somewhere now. They're from around the Northeast. Just great blazing hardcore with a lot of Crust elements. There's a fair amount of like Inepsy and Motorhead in there, as well as a lot of Japanese hardcore. They cover Misery by Bastard, if that gives you any indication of what we're sounding like here. A lot of Motor Charge stuff. Some great like metallic leads, some twin leads, a little bit there in there tastefully. Really great, like kind of Japanese hardcore style vocal. Excellent LP, certainly worth checking out. I forgot to mention, and this is a good time to do that, links to all the releases I talked about, all these 2025 releases will be in the description below if you want to support the artists. Band's definitely worthy of your support. Burning Wind, Hellbound. This was a big one for me right when I started shooting videos again. This is the Alienator LP, Meat Locker. Just killer, just knuckle-scraping thrash, crossover, hardcore thrash stuff. Big kind of like, I'd say like early to mid 80s combat records, like first couple Agnostic Front records, the kind of more metallic Poison Idea stuff. They're Portland dudes. You can definitely hear that influence. Just super violent, great like reverb soaked like 80s style production that just brings to mind like the finest releases from Roadrunner and Combat Core and stuff like that, like the Crumbsuckers record and stuff along those lines. Like just the way the vocals are affected and like the sound of the drums and stuff is just perfect for that time period. Just ripping stuff, real heavy, thrashy, moshy crossover. Great. And then finally, for this little thrown in clip, Cigarette Camp Steps. This came out on Dead Broke Records. Gotta love the layout with this stuff. I think Jeff, the main songwriter, singer, guitarist guy, does the graphic stuff on this, if I'm not mistaken. Does really cool flyers, that really busy, high contrast, like photocopied kind of thing. I always like that. Great leather jacket pop punk. I talked about that recently, going through all my favorite albums. I mentioned Screeching Weasel and Sloppy Seconds. Pop punk that comes from the Ramones school, you know, kind of angry, snotty, relatively raw, especially compared to whatever's considered pop punk nowadays. But this stuff is great. You know, it's their own take. They're not doing a clone version of one of the aforementioned bands. It's 3-chord, ripping, kind of catchy stuff. Great melodies, great vocals. It's got a little bit of like a hot mic kind of distortion on the vocals, which gives it a nice kind of DIY sort of presentation and sheen. It's not afraid to be a little on the raw side, which I really like. But yeah, this is a great record for that style. Check it out. I liked it so much that I bought a CD discography that included this and everything else by the band too. It's got Nobi Strip. It's from Japan. Check it out. Sweet. All right. Take it away, me from yesterday. Hey. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. So, things escalated very quickly. I hope everyone had a great New Year, by the way. A happy and safe New Year. I know I did. Just sang a little karaoke. That was about it. At our own house. Safely. Safe karaoke in my own basement with my family. That was my excitement. That being said, everybody's been doing 2025 lists. I think most of them are out. I'm usually a Johnny-come-lately with these. I don't really get them out until the new year. Not really going to do a list, because I just did a massive list, in case you missed it. 4 updates chronicling my top 100 favorite albums. Check them out if you get a chance. I'm going to put them in a playlist, I think, soon, so for your convenience, you can watch them all the way through. So I wanted to talk about 2025 releases. I'm just going to go through most of the stuff that I got that came out this year, which is going to be a daunting task in and of itself, because I always think it's not that much, and then I turn around and start pulling stuff out, and it's like, oh yeah, okay. So, good amount of LPs, stack of CDs, couple of 7-inches. I'm going to talk about reissues as well. No particular order. Hate to do the cop-out thing, but I am exhausted with ranking things. I may do a top 5 or top 10 and throw it in like a reel or a YouTube short or something later in the week if I'm feeling up for it. But right now, I just want to talk about some of the stuff I picked up. A lot of this stuff, too, is like recent acquisitions. I went on a buying freeze for a little over a month. Wasn't buying anything. And then recently, I've been like, oh, yeah, that's out. Oh, I got to check that out. So, you know, the whole opening the floodgates kind of thing happened. I'll start at the top with the... Well, let's start with some 7-inches, actually. I've only got 2 of these. We'll kick it off with a couple of 7-inchers. This was a band I heard a lot of good stuff about. Living down in Raleigh for a while there. This came out on Sorry State this year. This band's got a couple other records on top of this. Great hardcore punk from Cleveland, band called The Hell. Real snotty, early 80s style, kind of like slurry, drunken sounding, snotty sort of vocal approach with raging, raw, fast hardcore punk behind it. Catchy though. There was a description online saying Darby Crash singing for Pick Your King era Poison Idea, which that's about right. You know, really good stuff from Cleveland. Can't go wrong with most hardcore from Cleveland, including, although not solely from Cleveland, a Cleveland mastermind right here, Aaron Melnick playing guitar in the Final Agony 7-inch. Everything you could possibly want. You know, you've got the stark monochromatic looking like photocopied style, old-timey, classic artwork, high contrast, and then on the back you've got this Vine font here, very early 90s, and it sounds a lot like Integrity, as you can imagine. They're definitely going for a thing. If you like Integrity and In Cold Blood, you know, fast, evil hardcore with metal tinges and really killer solos, look no further. This is awesome, especially if you like Those Who Fear Tomorrow and Humanity is the Devil, all the classic stuff, all the early 7-inches. This is certainly worth checking out. The vocalist, whose name is escaping me, sang for Red Death and Brain Tourniquet and I believe Genocide Pact, one of those. Great stuff. Great vocals, very, as you can imagine, pretty like Dwid style vocals. But if you need your fix of early Integrity style stuff, this is one to check out for sure. All right. Get into some LPs. Those of you who've been following the channel for a while, you probably know that I've been on a Doom kick. Mostly like traditional Doom, although I've been kind of dipping my toes in more Death Doom stuff the past couple of months. Namely like Peaceville kind of Death Doom stuff that's a little bit multi-instrumental with like keyboards and kind of gothic tones to it, you know, that kind of thing. And I'm starting to go back into like heavier stuff, listening to black and death metal the past couple of months. But as part of the whole Doom obsession that I've been into, this I got pretty recently. A band called Tarpit, not to be confused with the hardcore band Tarpit from 20 years ago. Scrying the Angel Gate. This band is from, I want to say, Portland? This band I want to say is from Oakland or Portland. They're on Transylvanian Recordings, and I feel like most of the bands on that label are from Oakland or Portland, but I could be wrong. I had it in my brain and it left. Regardless, this is awesome doom metal. A little bit more on the soulful and kind of croony side. We're not talking like straight up power metal vocals over Sabbath riffs. It's more influenced by 70s hard rock, classic hard rock stuff, heavy rock, if you will. There's a good kind of groove to everything. More kind of, I wouldn't say like straight up Danzig kind of vocals, but in that general style. Ian Astbury, you know, good crooner metal vocals. Good stuff. I got this earlier this year. I think Eric Bauer recommended this to me. This is the Demon Smoke LP. Also came out on Transylvanian Recordings. Resin Rot. And this is just that destroyed larynx kind of sludge, you know, for fans of Buzz Oven and I Hate God. A little bit meaner sounding, like a little less aping straight up Black Sabbath riffs the way I Hate God does. There's a little bit more just kind of like straightforward crushing sludge to it. Maybe a little bit dirgier. But yeah, it's certainly got those really, really just ruined kind of sludge vocals. Like if you like that kind of stuff, you'd be into this. Certainly if you're into Buzz Oven and Weed Eater and things like that. Then this band is from Portland. This is Hog with an umlaut over the O. Black Hole. This is a riding easy band. This is great. It's got a fair amount of the doomy elements to it, but it's got a lot of other stuff going on. Like I'd say like some Deep Purple and some Motorhead and stuff like that. A very strong like 70s Motorhead vibe to it, which is something that makes me want to listen over and over again. Because you don't hear as much like 70s Motorhead influence except with a few bands like Overdose. So this is a great release. It's super rockin'. Very good. A lot of up-tempo parts, but a fair amount of doom too. This is a cool release. So this is off of my friend Ryan's label, Hex Records. This is the Haunted Horses Facet split. Cool packaging. It's got this sort of like cutout mask thing that has the lyrics on either side there. Haunted Horses and Facet. Haunted Horses are from the Pacific Northwest as well. And they're more like stripped down, minimalist, kind of like rhythmically kind of industrial sounding hardcore, for lack of a better term. You know, kind of noise rockish, sort of Swans kind of stuff. They're very interesting. And Facet, the band on the other side, is also sort of post-hardcore and noisy. The blurb says Unwound and Quicksand. I'm not really familiar with Unwound, but I can see the slow kind of plodding but catchy riffs that Quicksand has. More noisy than that stuff, though. A little bit more grit to it. Great release. And, oh yeah, and again, I don't care about vinyl that much, but this color, if you can see it, is something like I've never really seen before. This color is really cool. It's marbled, but only when you really hold it up to the light. This kind of cosmic pinkish red, if you can see that. It's nice. And I kind of had it stacked like this for a reason. I couldn't talk about Hex Records stuff. So much of this stuff on Hex is influenced by this band, and I know the label founder Ryan's a big fan. There's a new Deadguy record this year. Deadguy Near Death Travel Services. This is a good example of a classic band coming back, doing something similar to what they were doing before, not completely reinventing their sound, but also kind of renewing things, you know, refreshing things a little bit. Aesthetically, they're doing something different with this photo. They're not going for like the 50s pop art thing anymore. They're very much coming into their older age. It's decades later, and it feels right. It feels like they're not forcing anything. And the music is kind of in a similar fashion. It's definitely Deadguy. It's certainly very identifiable vocally and with the riffs and everything. But the riffs are a little bit more straightforward. They're a little bit slower. It's not quite as hectic. It's a little bit more metal. You know, they're not doing going metal or, you know, writing Iron Maiden parts or anything like that. But it's a little less choppy and crazy and chaotic than their classic stuff. But it's still very much identifiably Deadguy in sound. Tim Singer sounds awesome on it. You know, hasn't lost any venom or anything like that. Keith Huckins' playing is great. Cool layout. I mean, there's a little bit of that 50s pop art there, I guess. That flying saucer, but visually and aesthetically is awesome. I am not disappointed in the slightest. Came out on Relapse this year. Next one's a big one for me. I heard a bit about this band. A few people hit me to them, namely Wyatt and Ben NG, and I didn't know anything about him. I was definitely intrigued when I saw the cover. This is Chainmail Commandos by Steroid. I believe Australian one-person project. I thought it was a woman singing. Apparently it's just pitch-shifted vocals. What we have here is lo-fi metal with kind of like 80s synth-pop elements, like 80s Devo, Casio keyboard kind of stuff, meets like raw new wave of British heavy metal kind of music that's like super catchy. I haven't heard anything really like this before. This is very, very cool. And as far as I know, Crypto the Wizard I have a few of their other releases. Another one in particular that I was really impressed with this year. Crypt of the Wizard's a cool label, but I know they do a lot of dungeon synth stuff. I know that the chief songwriter in this does a lot of dungeon synth kind of things, which might say something about the songwriting process itself. You know, I think coming out of that genre and doing something like this, you're going to create something that's a bit different than any other type of musician approaching a concept like this. Get into some Boston stuff here. This is the Casket Rats LP, which came out on TP this year. Rat City Rockers. Keith Bennett, local Boston institution. Played in bands going back to the late 80s when he was in Wrecking Crew. Most recently before this, he'd been doing a band called Panzer Bastard for well over a decade that were more metal, sort of Motorhead Discharge kind of stuff. Elements of Celtic Frost sometimes. Really good band. Really good band. Always fun to see. And I think at least one of these guys, Goose here, was involved with like the last lineup of Panzer Bastard. This is definitely a bit of an about face. This is more like kind of sleaze rock kind of stuff. A lot of stuff kind of bringing to mind Electric by the Cult, and probably a bunch of bands that I don't even really listen to that I hear Keith kind of quoting influence from, like Zodiac Mind Warp and a bunch of stuff I don't know. But it does have like a certain sort of like Sunset Strip kind of sleaze to it, you know, not like pretty boy shit necessarily. A lot of ugly like AC/DC kind of riffing, just party time rock and roll metal kind of stuff. And it's really, really well done. Very catchy. Just heavy enough to keep my attention, but a certain like pop sensibility to it as well. It's great. Then the Massacred. So I think it was last year that the Savage Heads LP came out. I think I sung high praises of that. This is some of the same members. Savage Heads were more of a almost straight up like Partisans Worship kind of band, the UK punk band from the early 80s. This has that influence. There's a lot of that Riot City kind of stuff going into this. Me being a little bit of a pleb with a lot of that, you know, I have all the comps and a bunch of the punk and disorderly stuff. A lot of the more obscure UK 82 bands just kind of go over my head, or I don't really have that much to say about them. I'm not going to talk about like, oh, these parts remind me of Blitzkrieg or anything, but it's honoring that style really, really well. It's not D-beat. The drumming style is not really like that. If anything, it reminds me a lot of The Exploited, which I realize is really basic. The Exploited and GBH and stuff like that. Very, very well done, like rough, kind of deep-ish kind of vocals, but, you know, discernible. Especially there's like I think it's one of the last songs on here. Might be Extermination. There is a song on here that has more of that plotting, like almost sort of Killing Joke influence that The Exploited did on Horror Epics, which is my favorite album by them. So that's very good. Memory Ward. I just picked this up. This is their full length. Self-titled full length. Came out on Total Peace Records. This is a band from Phoenix, Arizona. Super noisy, fast, early 80s style hardcore punk. Some of it kind of reminds me of Die Kreuzen. Got that really harsh kind of vocal approach. You know, kind of fuzzed out sounding vocals, you know, broken mic style vocals. Obvious nod to Wretched there with the font. Very cute how it's the mirror image on the back in negative. It's very nice. But yeah, great riffs and everything. It's got that falling apart kind of quality that a lot of that, you know, wild and wacky 80s style hardcore has. Homefront, Watch It Die. This is a band from Canada, I want to say, that do kind of a what if scenario, like what if Blitz kept going with the Second Empire Justice record and tightened it up a little bit and maybe brought more Oi influence back into that. It's like synthy, anthemic, like street punk, basically. Very, very good. Their last record was excellent. I've heard a little bit of discourse talking about how they're just kind of spinning their wheels on this one and the first one was better. I don't know. I think this is great. I've spun it a handful of times and I'm not always in the mood for stuff with keyboards, especially like stuff like this. But this is just exceedingly catchy, well-written stuff. Scimitar, Scimitarium 1. This is another Crypt of the Wizard band. I do not know where they're from. I like trying to figure out where a band is from just by their names. Ekstrand, Anders Jorgensen. Okay, they got to be from Sweden, right? Or maybe Norway, somewhere in Scandinavia. Anyways, this is great. It's super melodic, powerful metal. Female vocalist. It does kind of sound like... It reminds me a little bit of that first Christian Mistress record, which is high praise for me, because that's one of my favorite modern heavy metal albums of all time. This is a little bit more crazy in the intensity department, whereas Christian Mistress kind of had more of an early 80s speed metal kind of thing, meets traditional metal, like kind of Kill 'Em All sort of kind of stuff going on. This has elements of black metal, I feel like just here and there with the riffing. Nothing super blatant, nothing like, oh, way to just throw a Dark Throne riff in the middle of your like melodic metal song. They do it really seamlessly, and it's very, very catchy. I'm going to say this and the Steroid, two of my AOTYs. I'm kind of creating the top 5 as I'm going here. Illiterates does not compute. You can't go wrong with this band. This is their 3rd LP. Pittsburgh band. They've been around for a bit now. Bunch of releases. All of it's great. They always have a tendency to mix these really nasty stomping riffs with these snarling vocals. It doesn't come off as moshy for the point of moshiness, They've got snarling vocals that in a way kind of remind me of Ray Capo, but they're certainly not a youth crew band. They pride themselves on being stupid hardcore. Like every single release they have relates to them being dumb, And although like it's deceptively simply written, everything is super catchy. They seem to be mixing it up a little bit more with styles on this. All 80s hardcore, but like maybe a little dash more like nasty stuff on this. It's like a little meaner, not beat down or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but all of their records are great though. And the new Hellshock, XXV 25. This is great. I really like the last one. I haven't listened to the last one in about a year now. I remember it being very death metal via the OG Crust bands and like Bolt Thrower and stuff. Like all that focused into kind of a death metal sound. This has a little bit more variation on it. Todd Burdett of Tragedy, many others, plays on this. And there's elements of slight tinges of black metal, but I hear more almost like kind of Bathory stuff on this, and as well as more straightforward, fast kind of Crust stuff. It's pretty cool. It's very epic. There's 6 songs on it, but it's a pretty long EP, if you want to even call it that. It's approaching album length. It's got a very like cold atmosphere to it. I talked about that recently on Metallurgy. But yeah, super well written. The vocals are a little bit higher register on this one. And all in all, it's great. I mean, I don't think Hellshock have any bad records, but this is pretty darn good. If it's better than the last one, which was self-titled, if I'm remembering right, like that's saying a lot because the last one was excellent. Zeicrideus, La Grande Heresy. Sorry for not saying that with a French accent. I'm not going to do that. So this is Phil Tougat from Cathedral and many others. Very talented French
Canadian
guitarist there. Doing spin on basically Greek black metal. Talking Verathron, Necromantia, Rotting Christ, of course. All that stuff. This came out on Nameless Graves this year. I mean, the cover art, that's perfect. You almost know immediately what that's going to sound like. The thing about this that's very cool is, like, a lot of those Greek bands were kind of learning as they went, and they're all awesome songwriters and everything, but there was a certain limitation in terms of, like, recording equipment early on and everything, and that is the reason why a lot of that is so appealing, the rawness and everything. But it is cool to hear somebody who's already settled into themselves as a very accomplished musician doing almost like a virtuoso version of all those bands, particularly with the bass work on this. It's insane. It's so good. It kind of leans almost into, like, intentionally or not, I'm not sure, but leans into like post-punk territory with like some noodling at some point. But just very, very, very catchy riffing and like dizzyingly talented playing all over this. Great epic listen. Then we have Pasmo, along with the Steroid record. This is also a really cool merging of styles that's almost like a bizarro version of that record, now that I think about it. This originally came out in 2024, but I'm going to count this because it was reissued on Sentient Ruin this year. I don't know how far the reach it was in 2024. This is available to me domestically now, and originally on cassette. It's a 2-person project from the Czech Republic. It's this odd combination, again, of sort of post-punk stuff, weird synthy, cold synthy post-punk with metal. A lot of it kind of traditional metal, maybe leaning into thrash a little bit, but it has that very specific Eastern Bloc, or what was the Eastern Bloc, kind of coldness to it. It does feel older, although it's a new release. Like, it feels like something that could have existed in the late 80s or early 90s, but it's just coming out now. It's a very interesting and kind of challenging listen, but I think it's a brilliant record. Very cool combination of stuff that I'd never heard before. All right, then I've got a stack of death metal. Now, this whole year, I've said it numerous times, like, that I'd burnt out on the really cavernous death metal stuff, and mostly I was talking about, like, new bands. I'm not going to name any names. I'm not a negative kind of guy in terms of just, like, bashing stuff. There's some stuff that came out the past, I don't know, not so much this year. Maybe it was just off my radar. Maybe plenty of this stuff came out this year. But the year before and before that, I'm talking like maybe 2021 through 2023 or 4, that was just very like knuckle-dragging, cavernous, slow, kind of hookless. That's the main issue I had with it. Death metal stuff with very like muffled, echoey vocals. Like, I just burnt out on stuff like that from people that are new at doing it. And there might be something I'm missing there, just in terms of like, this just isn't for me in one way or the other. There's plenty of doomy death metal that I was stoked to buy this year. I haven't really talked about most of it yet. I did talk about the new Hooded Menace, but I'll briefly mention that. Most of the stuff that kind of falls in this sort of bucket with me is from sources that I've learned to trust over the years, like either musicians that I know personally that have been at this for a while, or people that have new projects that are good, stuff like that. Not that I don't know the Hooded Menace people personally, but Lachrymose Monuments of Observation, new Hooded Menace. I check in with Hooded Menace every album or so. I go way back with them to Fulfill the Curse, which I special ordered from Dementia, I believe in Poland, years ago, right when it came out, because I just immediately fell in love with their sound. You know, the Finnish kind of doomier side of death metal, like Ripakulu, and also maybe some very early Cathedral and Winter and stuff like that. Just really well done doomy death metal back in whenever that was, 2008, 2009. And they've kept at it over the years. They've done a string of great records. Never Cross the Dead's another good one, the second album. The Tritonus Bell's good. They have a lot of great stuff. This is not nearly as swampy vocals, a lot more kind of a melodic metal approach, tinging everything. You know, still very doom death, but a little bit more, traditional metal kind of seeping in, and elements of it that are also kind of leaning towards the Peaceville doom death stuff. That's considerably less murky than the stuff I was talking about earlier. But yeah, great CD. It was a little bit divisive. They did Save a Prayer by, I think it's Duran Duran or Aha, one of those bands. I don't know. You know, some people thought that was kind of terrible. I thought it was not a bad cover. Better than the In Flames cover of Blasphemous Rumors, anyway. Then we've got Deteriorot, Awakening. Pretty hot on the heels of Rebirth, their last CD, which I think came out the year before, or pretty close to that. I got to see Deteriorot once in Charlotte, hung out with Paul a bit. You know, we both lived in North Carolina. Hell of a nice guy. Great songwriter. This record is cool because it's got a certain murky, slow death metal thing to it. It's got plenty of up-tempo elements as well. It's produced, the production feels perfectly 90s to me. I don't know what it is exactly about it, but it's very, very like upfront and in your face. It's got kind of a good kind of crispy kind of production to it that I really like. And the doomy passages are awesome, super heavy and crushing. And it's varied in that it has a little bit more of a slightly accessible element to it. There's some gallopy parts that remind me of like mid-period Carcass a little bit that are really good. Just a solid death metal record for sure. And then Pain Effulgence by Innumerable Forms. Again, another songwriter I've known for some time that just knows how to put together music. Justin DeTore of Magic Circle and Mind Eraser and Sumerlands and many, many more. This started as his death metal project. I think there was one other guy involved. Now it's a full band. And I think Jensen Ward is involved in this as well, from Iron Lung and some other notable people. Very, very great. It's awesome hearing something this murky and cavernous and this catchy at the same time. There's a fair amount of reverb on the vocals, but you can still discern certain key words and everything. The riff progressions in it are astounding. It's very, very well written. Kind of on the doomier side death metal stuff. I wouldn't even say death doom necessarily, but very good. Primitive Man, Observance. This is another try I'm giving this band. I had one or two of their CDs that I checked out, and they were good. I might not have been in the mood at the time. I should go back to them. Got a little bored with them, if I'm being honest. You know, it's very kind of like abrasive on the ear, you know, like speakers being ripped apart by just how distorted everything is, kind of production. Kind of sludge, kind of doom and death metal all thrown together. I think they're from I want to say the American Southwest somewhere. This has all those elements, but it's not quite as deliberately abrasive. I feel like it's a little bit smoother than their earlier recordings. There's definitely long, dirgy passages with just like the drop, you know, that kind of thing. I performed the most Sisyphean task ever, which was going through my drawers next to me here that are just filled with all kinds of cables I don't need, and organized everything while listening to this, and it was the perfect soundtrack. I know that sounds vaguely insulting. I don't intend it as such. It's actually a really good, heavy, slow kind of sludge death metal record. Then we've got Evoken Mendacium. This is awesome. Certainly pairs well with the Primitive Man. Evoken's one of those funeral doom bands that's kind of escaped me for a long time. I have something on cassette of theirs that I want to say Necroharmonic put it out. I think it was a reissue of a demo or something. Nothing else. This is the first thing I'm buying by them. And it's got that return to form logo I noticed. Like, I was kind of looking at their catalog, looking at their early stuff. This was like the logo that was on their demos. Often when that happens, the artist is trying to hint at like, hey, this is going back to the old style or something. I'm not sure about that, but this is wonderful, mournful funeral doom with a lot of kind of death doom gothic elements. I feel like some clean narrative passages and some gorgeous keyboards and crushing heaviness, like a very, very strong death metal element to it. Very slow motion, very glacial, just wonderful. This is very, very good. Beautiful record in a lot of ways. Then Pissgrave, Malignant Worthlessness. Love that title. I saw a lot of people clamoring for this. Actually, I never got their older stuff. That was like 2017, 2018. At the time, I was just like, they're just trying to shock people with their gore covers and whatever. Plenty of bands have done that. At the time, I just didn't get around to buying anything, and stuff sold out and whatever. Kind of regretting that, because this is really good. It's got a certain like swampy, just miasma of gore kind of feel to it, but it also has a certain like double tracked vocal thing that kind of reminds me of Floridian stuff like Deicide. That's pretty catchy, and I love bands that shit and get off the pot. This is 9 songs, and it's like around a half an hour. It's to the point. They just kick your ass and leave. Can't get enough of that. That's great. Good slab of death metal. And then another band that doesn't waste any time, Cruentation, Damned Fallen Angels. This is Mike. He's a local Boston institution as well. He's played in Witch Tomb and Sewer Goddess, and members of Martivore are also involved in this. I'm not sure if Mike played with them as well. But this is, again, just really well-written death black metal stuff. I'm getting a little bit of like early Profanatica and stuff like that thrown in here, and some Bestial stuff, but it's much more focused. It's like it's a modern focused version of those kinds of influences. Some early death metal too. It's got that kind of haywire blasting to it that feels very black metal, feels like it could go off the rails, but kind of holds it, and then goes into some really crushing riffage a lot of the time. It certainly does have sort of a war metal tone to it, but maintains the chaos in a pretty interesting way. It's very, very well written. Great playing. I mean, these guys are all veterans of the New England scene and are killing it on this. This is great. And keeping it in Boston, shifting gears a little bit. Oh, there's a dick on this. C4. Payback's a bitch. I had their last record, Chaos Streaks. I loved it. I thought this was even better. C4's a hardcore band. They've got some metallic touches. Little bit of crossover. You know, the real like meat-headed, like SOD carnivore crossover maybe. A fair amount of like Straight Ahead and NYC Mayhem in there too. Great, really, really angry vocals. Like the vocals on the last one were kind of more straight ahead, clean, New York hardcore kind of shouting. These are there's a little bit more phlegm and gristle. You know, you're reaching more towards, I don't know, something closer to Dwid maybe, kind of. You know, a little bit more growl behind it. Just mean though. This has been a consistent gem spin for me. Just negative, you know, kind of tongue in cheek. You know, nothing too serious, but just a big like, you know, fuck you kind of to everybody kind of hardcore stuff. They've got the Sitgo sign, you know, that's Boston through and through. Came out on Triple B. Rules, more reps. And we got Coroner, Dissonance Theory. You know, I'm not the biggest Coroner head, but I saw this at Newbury, and I was like, you know what? I've heard good things. We've seen some pretty cool return records over the years. The Possessed comeback record was pretty decent. The Sadist one was okay. Lacked like that brilliant Sadist bass playing, unfortunately, but it was solid. This is, out of all the comebacks I've heard recently, probably the best. This is great. To me, it sounds a lot like Mental Vortex, you know, all their classic material, maybe later on in their catalog. I'm not familiar with Grin at all, so I can't really comment on that, but it's got the very extremely competent playing, not technical for technicality's sake though. The vocals sound just as raspy and spiteful as ever. Killer. Then Society's Pact with Satan by Cathedral. Obviously, I was excited to get this. It is one long song that is 30 minutes long almost, 29 minutes and 44 seconds. You got to go with that. You got to love that great 70s cult goat head guy there. I can see why they shelved this. It was recorded 10 years ago or more, 2014, I want to say. From what I read, they put the recording aside and didn't know what to do with it and just decided to release it as one release, one EP, technically, I guess. And that was disappointing because I thought Cathedral maybe got back together. And this is a lot dirgier than the stuff they were doing before they broke up. I can see why. Much like everything past the Ethereal Mirror, it's very meandering and riff salady, like a lot of Cathedral stuff, where it's just like, what's going on? What are they doing? But either you like that or you don't. I happen to like it. This seems to be a lot more dirgy and dark than their last couple of releases. Last Spire was kind of going back towards the darker elements of Cathedral, but you know, it was no Forest of Equilibrium. This is almost as close as you can get to their really, really doomy stuff, and it's one long song. And then finally, 1 of 9, Dawn of the Iron Shadow. This is just sharp as a tack, melodically tinged J.R.R. Tolkien themed black metal stuff. It's got some great kind of atmospheric like keyboards and stuff like that. There's some good like tolling of the bells early on in the recording. Doesn't go into full like melodeath melodies or anything, but it leans into that a little bit. Hyper fast, you know, lots of blasting and everything. Just really well done. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Let's talk about reissues real quick. This came out on Sealed Records. They must have collaborated with Blurg or with Subhumans, because all this is done in that iconic... I think it was Dick Lucas does all the penmanship on here. Somebody from the band, anyway. This is the Subhumans demos collection. Early Subhuman stuff. A lot of it is live, documenting the beginning of the band. Most of the stuff made it to full, proper albums and everything, but there's a few songs on here, I think, that are exclusive to this. There's a song called Pisshead on here. I'm trying to see. Most of these look like they made it Trowbridge Park. Not familiar with that one. Anyways, demo era Subhuman stuff. If you don't know the Subhumans, get on that shit. It's super important early pioneering anarcho-punk. I am only doing the air quotes thing because they fit in with that scene, but they also wrote really catchy stuff. I think they kind of were ambassadors of that style way outside of its parameters. Famously kind of mixed in elements of prog and reggae sometimes, but kept that sort of raw recording. Super punk, snotty vocals. Some of the best lyrics written in the genre. Super intelligent. Read their autobiography if you get a chance. It's excellent. This is a beautiful double LP, and even though the stuff is raw recording-wise, and a lot of it's live, they were such good players that it mostly all sounds great. So check it out. Subhumans Demolition War demos. And then we've got the Mindrot 1990 demo, which came out on FOAD. And I was so excited to see this make it onto Wax. I do have an original copy of it. I think it was originally just a demo tape that was, handed out or whatever. It was reissued on Wild Rags back in the day. It came out officially semi on Wild Rags as like a cassette EP. But this is a vinyl pressing of it. 1990 demo. Mindrot were a great pioneering death doom band that kind of had roots in Crust. Them and Morgion, I feel like, kind of came from that weird Southern California scene that had crusties and death metal people that were all kind of coalescing and making some pretty interesting music. The Phobia was part of that too, I believe. But yeah, this is stripped down, doomy, slightly crusty kind of death metal stuff, and it's so good. You gotta love the burning silhouette there for the cover. Classic. And then got the Nasm. Inhaled, Exhaled, Revived, which I kind of hemmed and hawed on this. I'm like, I have the CD, Inhale, Exhale. How much better is this going to sound? Then I realized that there's bonus tracks with remixes and outtakes and covers. And I was like, well, that's worth the price of admission for me. And I put this on my stereo, put it on my CD player, and it sounds awesome. It is super loud. It really brings out the brightness in the songs, like it's all remastered and everything. It sounds excellent, so that's definitely worth it for me. Classic grind stuff. R.I.P. Miesco. And then finally, Husker Du, The Miracle Year. Numero Group put this out. Really interesting label, Numero Group. I have a bunch of their releases. I could have probably grabbed a few for this update, although this is as long as it needs to be right now anyway. But they do an interesting reissue series of all this very obscure, lost to the sands of time, and some pretty well-known stuff too from the kind of Midwest emo and screamo genres from the 90s. A lot of cool stuff that I've caught up with, Frail and stuff like that. I think a lot of that stuff came out this year, but I didn't grab it, so sorry. And they also do like jazz and soul and stuff like that, which is like just as much, so that's pretty interesting. But they put out this Husker Du 1985, The Miracle Year. It's all very well recorded live stuff from the golden era Minneapolis punk band, known for bringing a lot of like cool melodic elements that did not exist previously into hardcore and punk. Very, very important stuff. I mean, some of this stuff might have gotten reissued or come out as bootlegs or whatever at some point. I don't really know. But it's got definitely some classic tracks on it. New Day Rising, It's Not Funny Anymore, Everything Falls Apart, Hate Paper Doll, Diane, stuff from Metal Circus, New Day Rising, all that stuff, going back to that early stuff like Statues era, I think, stuff from that era. But cool. It's from 1985, Husker Du. All right. And that's just about it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and say probably the Steroid, the Zeicrideus, however that's pronounced, the Massacred, and the Pasmo, and we'll say the Hellshock. Those are my top 5. I'll put them together in another format for you at some point. Maybe. Okay, bye.